can address it immediately. So just know that you have that chat option down there. For those of you who have done the Zoom before, you'll also see that there's a screen share that I can use, and I'll be moving into screen share, letting you know about that as we move forward on there. The other norm that I would like to set, obviously decorum and empathy and kindness and civility when it comes to our discussions. But I'd also like to see your faces. It's very difficult. I love the names, but it's very difficult sometimes to kind of see who's speaking, and I can better address you and get to know you a little bit better if I can see your faces. I recognize that some of you are hesitant to turn on your videos. I mean, it's 8 in the morning and you've all become rather accustomed to working from home. But I think it's also a good idea to try to get it to a sense of normalcy, as if you were attending a face-to-face course, coming to class, dressed and all of that, and ready to go. So I really appreciate that you are turning on your videos, and I can see your faces and you can see mine, and you're all just wonderful.
My camera doesn't work, so I had to put a picture instead. That's why I don't have a video.
That's okay. We see the picture there. You're wearing your mask. Very nice.
Yes.
Yeah, mine's not
Wear your mask.
So, way to go, Sabrina. So yes, and as we move forward, when we have our meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays, again at 8 o'clock, try to be there in a timely manner. Do turn on your videos. Please feel free and comfortable to ask questions, to share your views, to share your insights. All views and all informed opinions are welcome. I hope you had an opportunity to see my welcome video and some of the course expectations. But for the most part, in terms of Zoom, try to be there at 8 o'clock. Make sure that you check your emails to see that I've sent you the link, and you can click in and join the fun. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to go over the course itself, talk a little bit about the syllabus so you're kind of clear on what the expectations are, what the assignments are, can ask questions about that, and we can work on that. I'm going to delve into a little bit of the modules for those of you who may be new to Canvas, and this may be, again, new. It's not difficult. It's very user-friendly. And for those of you who've had it, it's just a little bit of review, and specifically in terms of our course. So I'll be going over some of the assignments as we go forward. And then I'd like to open up a discussion about an assignment that's pending, why we create art, that will lead us into our discussion of the humanities. And we'll move into our first focus on Minoan and Mycenaean civilizations. Okay? So can somebody tell me, did you get a chance to see the Sister Wendy video that I posted under Why We Create Art? Did anybody get a chance to see that video?
No.
No. You're going to enjoy it. I also have another video there that is a kind of a virtual tour of the earliest forms of art, the cave paintings at Lascaux. There are other cave paintings around the world, but we'll focus a little bit on that. So when you get a chance, perhaps today after the class, you can go ahead and take a look at that video. Before I switch the screen and kind of go into the syllabus and the course overview, I just want to discuss generally what the course is. Many of you have taken the course because you're very, very interested in humanity. Some of you may be taking it because it fulfills a requirement. Some of you are taking it because, wow, I have to get some units, and this was a course that I thought might be interesting. And many of you may not know what the humanities even are. So I want to kind of engage you a little bit. Who can tell me a little bit about what the humanities are and what we're about to study? Don't be shy.
Like the arts and science and...
Yes, if you view sciences as an art, it would fall under the humanities. And we will be discussing some of the theories and some of the advents and the philosophies that then led to particular advents in sciences. But for the most part, the arts, the sciences, and the humanities covers the arts. And the question becomes, why the arts? Why would we be studying the arts in something called the humanities. Now, the title itself should give you an insight into what the course is about. Why is it called the humanities?
It's just like the study of us, right? Like why we do what we do, why we thought it was necessary to create. Yeah.
Point why we thought it was necessary to create, as opposed to perhaps there was an impulse to do it.
Right.
You're absolutely right. It is about us. It's about what makes us distinctly, uniquely human. Now, I want to just say, I didn't even introduce myself just yet. I got so excited about the course and seeing your faces. I'm Edward Geica, and my last name is pronounced Geica, and I'll be your professor for this humanities course. It is about what makes us human, and I'm not the first, nor will I be the last word on what makes us human. But one thing that I think we might come to a consensus about, and please feel free to debate the points, is that it's only the human animal that creates art. Consider the word art itself. It forms other words like artificial. In fact, the arts are artificial. They are an attempt, depending on some theories, to artificially recreate nature, human nature, the environment, physical nature. In a lot of ways, art is the opposite of nature. And whether you're going through a theory which is called mimetic, I don't want to get too wonky here and into the weeds, but the idea of that art is meant to imitate. That's what mimetic means. We think about a mime who imitates an action, or mimicry when we imitate someone's voice. But mimetic theory suggests that art is meant to imitate nature and try to capture it in a particular form. And it can be from various forms of art. It can be dance, it can be painting, it can be sculpture, it can be literature, it can be music, an attempt to recreate nature. And so only the human animal creates this artifice. Only the human animal, due to what we term the cognitive revolution, something that occurred very early in our species, Homo sapiens sapien, that allowed us, and we don't know why that mutation occurred or how it occurred, but it allowed us to be able to conceptualize things that do not exist. It allowed us to imagine a fantasy, to create a story, to depict a vision of a future or our own conditions. And so it is only the human animal that's capable of doing that and rendering it, sharing it, expressing it, all the other impetuses that may lead to why we create art, that distinguishes us from all other animals. Now I know, and maybe some of you have seen also the YouTube video that shows an elephant painting. This is more of classical conditioning than the idea of an elephant suggesting and imagining, I want to capture this in art in one way or another. So what makes us uniquely human is that we create art in all its forms. And the question then becomes, well, why? Now you'll notice that I'm avoiding questions that deal with what is art and what is not art. We won't get into that just yet. And I don't know if I could give you a complete definition and criteria for that. But why is it that the human animal does create art? A song, a story, a painting, a sculpture, a play. And I'd like you to kind of just, address that question for a moment. Why do we do this?
To express ourselves?
Could you say that again?
To express ourselves?
Yes, and I see that some of you, like Brian and Dante and Elizabeth, I have asked for all of you to turn on your videos to express ourselves. And therein lies a key to something about art, right? If it is indeed to express ourselves, then what we express, in a sense, shows the world a little bit about who we are. Would you agree with something like that?
Yes.
So if there's a motivation to express yourself, what might you want to express about yourself?
Your thoughts, your emotions.
Feelings.
Feelings, thoughts,
Ideas.
emotions, these kinds of things. And so you suggested earlier that there was, I think it was you, Ara, suggested that there was a need to do this.
Right.
And
Just sometimes you just feel that there's something to say, even if you don't have the words or language wasn't always around, but language was around if you consider art language, right? Because art comes from our head, and art really isn't real unless it comes from us, right?
correct.
So I guess it is always some form of expression of thought, some expression of need to communicate with somebody else to share an ideal.
Absolutely. Anybody want to join in on that one? The need to share an idea, to share an emotion, to share a feeling. And why? Is it to make a connection with
To get some
someone
type
else?
of response from somebody, a stranger maybe, to get some type of response to give you the gratification, maybe to make you happy.
Or
Gratification.
to create a reaction or an emotion.
So sometimes art
Creating.
will provoke,
Yeah. Mhm.
right? It'll provoke someone.
Creating art creates other stuff.
Right. You're cutting in and out on me on this one, so okay. Yeah, so to express, to provoke, that's what art does. But I want to get a little deeper into this idea of expressing emotions, feelings, and whatnot, and go back to this notion of connecting to someone else. Are we expressing it in order to communicate this emotion, this feeling, this view, in order just to get a response or to feel that maybe others feel or think the way we do?
I mean, I think there's sometimes parts of us that we feel that can be very solitary, and we can think that it's only us, but yet once we express it through writing or express it through art or something, someone else connects to that way, and it's like, oh, wait, I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one that thinks this way or feels this way, because someone else is connecting to what I've just expressed.
Absolutely. So not only, and we've had that experience ourselves. We've heard a song that moves us. We've seen a painting that touches on a universal feeling, not only capturing the individual expression, the person who's the artist, but also a universal feeling, the moment and all moments. And that need to connect, whether we connect to the work that we're reading or viewing, or we connect to an audience by our works, that connection kind of feels good. I said earlier, we feel isolated, we feel solitary, I think is the term. And this need to connect is indeed a need, going back to what Ara said about a necessity to express. To some degree, I guess we're, gregarious species, we like groups, but this need to connect, to communicate our feelings, to share them, and to perhaps get them reciprocated in some way makes us feel less alone. And it also expresses very much about ourselves. And if you take it from the microcosmic, the individual, and then move it to a cultural, a larger macrocosmic level, a cultural need. And if it reflects and expresses the individual, and it gives us an insight into that individual, then the study of art gives us an insight also into that culture, into that civilization, the roots of our contemporary culture, why we have particular customs, particular mores, particular attitudes, a particular philosophy, a particular ethos, a particular mythology. And right now we're at a time where we are indeed questioning those things, questioning those narratives, questioning those mythologies that have led, as we speak about our contemporary times, to crisis, because perhaps the mythologies have played us false. So there's a real necessity to look into the art, the expression, the communication, the connection to our contemporary times. And art is perhaps the best way by which we can start to put our finger on the pulse, if you will, of not only the civilizations that came before ours that were the roots of ours, but also what's going on right now. And that's what we're going to be doing a lot about in this course. I don't like to look at art as something dead or something that's relegated to the past. Instead, it is alive. And when we speak about mythologies, whether they're Greek, Roman, Judeo-Christian, please do not believe that these have anything to do with faith-based beliefs or that it denigrates those beliefs one way or another. To speak is something as a mythology is not to say it is a lie or it is something false or something outlandish. Mythologies are created by the artists, by the visionaries, for many various reasons. And so we'll be discussing those things. How many of you are artists? I know that sounds like a highfalutin term, but anyone who sings is an artist, in my opinion. Anyone who dances, anyone who paints, anyone who sculpts, these are indeed artists. Any out there who like to write poetry or write songs?
I love to write.
You love to
Me.
write? Do you write short stories? Do you write fiction?
Poetry and short stories. I've been writing since I was about 12.
Yes. I think that it's a great, almost Rorschach test, a psychological test, when you consider the stories that individuals tell over and over again. You meet someone new and you're trying to share something about yourself and you tell the story about when I was a kid or when I was this or when I was that. Generally, we tell stories, I don't know why, of trauma. Rather than, oh my God, they whipped me in school and those kinds of things.
I mean, I think you have to be, I mean, everything, all your experiences, everything you ever go through, it's energy and you absorb it regardless if it's a positive one or a negative one, and it needs an outlet, you know. If not, you just repress and it comes out in any other way. But once you found some form of art or a positive expression, you know, you're not stuck into that trauma anymore. So art is definitely a healing outlet to find.
It's a key term these days, healing. Art is indeed healing. It is an avenue, a wholesome avenue, rather than repression and all these other things. Absolutely. And so I always think that you can tell about someone by the stories they tell about themselves. Sometimes there's the same story that we tell that everyone knew, and sometimes even to the people who've heard it 17 times. And the question becomes, why that narrative? What is it about that story? And when I think about the narratives and the stories that have been told, the mythologies that we have been told, why those stories? What are they trying to do? What do they really say? We shouldn't look at these things simply on the surface level. Oh, a god came down in the form of a swan, impregnated a mortal, and it's all fantasy. These stories, just like the stories that you tell, have a kind of almost subconscious, subtextual importance. And that's what we're going to try and get to in some of these early civilizations and cultures when we study their art. Okay? And I think the bottom line is the term you used was healing, and I agree completely with that. But this need to connect with someone else. One person, a larger supernatural quality, the cosmos, physics, something bigger than ourselves, something to get to share and therefore connect, is perhaps the best definition from this humble point of view of what love is. We confuse it with proximity. We confuse it with physicality. But what we're seeking to do is, in a sense, connect with something bigger than ourselves, something that is almost wordless, something that becomes and says, yeah, me too. And that is, in a sense, that healing you talked about, I believe, in art and what it really does for us. It connects us to our past, to our present, to each other, to all civilizations. Indeed, somebody said it earlier, art is a universal language. There are very few barriers except for those that we put in front of ourselves when we start to think about art as some intellectual thing. I can't stand people who go to museums and start to intellectualize everything. And because it's in the museum, it's got to be art, and they try to figure out why. No, 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 no. You go to a museum and you'll have an opportunity. Hopefully, if we get past this plague, you'll have virtual tours. You go there to experience. First, you experience. The moment you start to rationalize, intellectualize, you cease to experience. So I hope we get a chance to experience art. I see that I got a couple of chat questions here, so let me quickly, we want to bring emotions alive. Absolutely, absolutely. I'm about to switch my screen right now, and I'm just gonna go into the Canvas module and first kind of go over the syllabus so that you know expectations and what's there, and then we'll move on. So everybody okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so where do I want to go? Oh, God. I got it mixed.
I have a question. So if art is just something that we as humans do to communicate or express ourselves, then why is it that some humans get the opportunity to decide what is and what isn't art?
I'm not sure if I understand the question, but I think I do. When you speak about the art critic, when you
Right.
speak about, you said it, why do some people get that option? You know, there are individuals who have studied enough who can say, you know, I can recognize the quality, the craft, the vision, which is the most subjective aspect of it. And by virtue of that experience, they have an informed opinion, not just an opinion, an informed one. Does that mean that they're the first and the last word on this? No. To some degree, we can make it very relative and suggest that art is what I claim it to be. But just as all of us have a discriminating taste or judgment, we listen to, let's say, one song and we go, wow, that one hits it. That one did it. Spoke for me, spoke for everyone. And another one just didn't make it to that level. And so we might say that this one is, I hate to use the term, a better or more artistic one than another. The answer to your question is, who gets to do this? You do. For some reason, I'm having a little trouble here sharing my screen. So give me just 2 seconds and I'll see what I can do. Okay, so you'll have to tell me what you're looking at right now.
You just clicked on dashboard. You're looking at that.
You are logging in.
Excellent, 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 excellent.
And you're logged in?
Yeah, and this is you guys right here.
There you go.
Okay, so I'm gonna take you straight to the syllabus right now. Can you all see that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Excellent. So we do have online Zoom meetings every Tuesday and Thursday from 8 to 9:25. You'll be receiving the links to join. This is the textbook right here. It's called Culture and Values, a survey of the humanities. I'm holding it up for you right there. There is an ebook available. Earlier editions than the 9th edition will serve, and they're less costly. So you might want to look at this 8th, 7th, whatever it may be. While it does behoove you to kind of go through this, don't do it copiously and, oh my God, and if it gets a little tedious, you might want to stop reading. But when it gets interesting for you, delve a little deeper in it. Most of the embedded readings and material in Canvas would serve you, but this, like my lectures, hopefully will supplement your understanding and help you and aid you in submitting your assignments and sharing your ideas, okay? So the course description, you can read that all on your own. Hopefully by the end of the class, this will be the outcome. You'll have examined all of that. My methods of instruction, primarily, what I'm trying to capture in these Zoom meetings is a classroom environment and feeling. And therefore, I do want you to attend every single one. If you cannot, hey, life gets in the way sometimes. And even though there's nothing more important than the humanities, you may feel differently about that. Methods of instruction and evaluation. There are these categories of assignments. There are readings and responses. So you would read the material embedded along with the chapters and respond to the prompt there. When I get into the modules, you get to see this a little bit more. There are several of them. They total up this many points. There are discussions. Now, the availability for getting into the assignments, usually it's about 4 to 5 days prior to the due date. So make sure you're pacing yourself. But with the discussions, to try and get a sense of kind of real time, it's like a 2-day opening and closing. The discussions, you must post first. You must post your response to the prompt. And then you can go back and respond to at least 2 of your peers. So some of you have already had that opportunity, have you not, with your introductions?
Yes.
Okay. Were there any problems or glitches?
No.
You'll let me know. Okay, let me know. And also, if ever in the modules in Canvas, there are links and those links have gone dead because sometimes they do that, they'll remove them. just let me know, and I'll revalidate the links. Don't be too frightened by the word essays. I am an English professor as well as a humanities professor. And in the rubrics for each of the assignments, there is an aspect of composition, grammar, a little bit of that, not too much. I don't want you worried too much about, where does my comma go, as opposed to just sharing your idea. So even though I call them essays and they are a little bit more introduction, body, conclusion quality to them, don't feel intimidated by them at all, or any of the assignments. And if you have any questions, any concerns, life gets on your back, email me, let me know what's going on. There is a museum paper, and that will be due in December, I believe. You'll see in just a moment. And as of now, the museums are closed, so you can't go and visit them. And the reason it's available very early is because I wanted to give you time to visit a museum if they were open. But in the module, I've also placed virtual tours. So you click into the links and you can see the Getty or you can see the Louvre. It's not the same thing. Hopefully at some point, maybe that'll change. But there's that paper. There are a couple of quizzes that total up to 55 points. There is a midterm and a final exam, and you'll see the point values there. The total possible points for the course is 1,000. And it's a straight 10% scale, so 1,000 through 900 is the A range, and so on and so forth. The course is divided up into units or modules, and so you can see that there. What's important about this is here's the first one we're in, the beginnings of Western civilization. I've given you the dates of the module itself. And for example, this one was available yesterday, and it was due yesterday. I've left it open, and so if some of you didn't get a chance to post, you still have an opportunity to do so. It will say on there late. I don't want you to worry about that. I'm not going to penalize you. We're just getting started. So if you haven't submitted your introduction, please do so. So we can see how it works, read these in culture and values. But what's important is that when these things become available and when these assignments are due. So for example, you'll see this discussion here. It's available September 5th. That's when it'll open up. You can get in there. You can submit it September 5th, but it's due September 9th. Point values are assigned, and so on and so forth. Are there any questions about this?
No.
No.
Very, very good. I want to go back to one thing here, quizzes. And these little quizzes are multiple choice. To tell you the truth, they're really policing the reading, and I'm using them almost as a study guide or an exercise for studying. The quizzes allow you 2 opportunities, and your score will be the highest of the 2. So here's a little piece of advice, and the quizzes only have a 2-day window of opening and closing, so make sure you're on top of that. You take it the first time. You see what the questions are. You do the best you can. Hopefully you get, 30 out of 30. But let's say you don't, but you've had access to the questions now. And there may be, as you're taking that first time, you're jotting down concepts, names, whatever it may be that you're not sure about. So before you take your second quiz, you might go on the net, you might look in the book, you might find some answers. So your second one, now you've done better, and the highest of the 2 go. Do not think that you are doing something, any kind of academic dishonesty here. I did it that way on purpose so that you go back and it, in a sense, forces you to look at certain things that are important once more. We all good on that?
Yeah.
Good. And the other thing I want to say is this. All of the assignments, all of the writing, I don't want to reread what others have written, whether it's in the textbook, in the readings embedded, or anything like that. I don't want a compilation of other people's ideas. I want that kind of study and reading to really just inform your views so that you can make the connections that I'm asking you to make, and that critical thinking aspect that I want in sharing your ideas. So you're reading all this material that informs you to your own views. And I don't want you getting worried or doing the wrong thing out of stress or anxiety and copying somebody else's ideas and submitting them as your own. Instead, I want you to feel I'm on your side, I'm right there with you, but I really want to hear your ideas as they're coming up. So everything is really asking you to make either connections to each other or connections to our contemporary society. How what we are studying relevant to our contemporary society? And you'll see that the prompts actually ask you to do that. So I really want critical thinking. I want you to take the facts, A equals B, fact, B equals C, extrapolate, therefore A equals C. So that's what I want you to do. Don't feel overwhelmed. We've got 16 weeks. It doesn't all have to be done today. And all along the way, I'll be helping you out. So there you go. Those are the modules. I've included an equity statement because it's really important these days. I want everyone to have access. I want everybody to have voice. I'm really not concerned about anything other than what you think and what you feel. And I think that it needed to be stated. If I need to be informed, let me know if there's anything getting in the way of your study, one way or another. If you need any kind of services, just click on links and you can get to there. This is important. Remember, don't out of stress or pressure or think that I don't know. Do not do anything that is against the academic integrity policy. Plagiarizing other people's ideas and submitting them as your own is a real serious violation. So listen, it isn't worth it. You're not being graded according to, Isaac Newton. You're being graded as to where you came in, what you've learned, and how you've demonstrated it. So please do not fall into that problem. It's very easy to find when that has happened. Understand this, and I know it makes everybody uneasy. Plagiarism isn't just taking whole ideas, whole passages, and popping them as your own. Summarizing somebody else's idea, the idea is what's copyrighted, is also a form of plagiarism. Putting somebody else's ideas into your own words, paraphrasing, is also a form. So when in doubt, show me the source. Let me know where you're getting it from. And please don't rely too much on sources. I don't want submissions of nothing but parentheses of sources. I want your ideas. Trust me. It's not a matter that I'm going to be generous. I just am that way. And I really get excited when I hear not what I've heard before, but what you think. So avoid this at all costs. You can read the attendance and the confidentiality and the civility policy here. Observe good etiquette. Let's show respect for ourselves primarily by showing respect to each other and the course. There's a drop policy. Any kind of Canvas problems, please look over here, Student Health Center, and any kind of academic support services. They are all there for you. We all good? Sort of. I know it's overwhelming. Please, you're all gonna go and get the flu after this. Any questions whatsoever?
No questions.
Excellent. Let's take a look at the modules for just a moment. You will see how they run. We've already done, most of you have already done discussion, introduce yourself to your classmates. You would click into this, so on and so forth. So I'm going to click into this one for just a second. And I can see here, one thing that I want to point out, you can all read this on your own, what I'm asking you to do. But there is, for all of the assignments, a rubric, big fancy word for kind of the criteria that I'm looking for in your submissions. And this isn't actually a good one because it's too brief, but let me just go to a different one for a second. And I hope I've uploaded the rubric. There's usually 3 dots at the top here for you if it hasn't shown up. So you're seeing this rubric right here. This one is focusing on your ideas, your content, and how you present them. Are they random and all over the place, or is there a kind of organization? So it really tells you, not that I want to ascribe, I'm taking away a point for this and a point for that, but it does give you kind of what good content and organization would be, what the middle level would be, and what needs a little bit of improvement. Now, the other category here is the grammar mechanics. I know that makes everybody edgy. It's only 5 of the points, and I'm very generous with that, but if I can figure out what you're saying, you'll be fine. If it's so convoluted or I don't understand the words, you might get a little bit of a deduction. But whatever you do, before you start to submit, you might want to take a quick look at the rubric. Also, before you submit, you may want to write it out on a document first and check it all out before you pop it into the text box there. Do give yourself the time and the pacing to do all these things so that you can do a really good job. You all good? So you can see that the modules will run by units. This first one is the beginnings. We're going to talk a little bit about this right now. You have a discussion that is due September 2nd, that is tomorrow. Kind of a little bit about what we discussed just now in class, why create art. You'll have a little bit more information if you click into the links there on Sister Wendy and what she says. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that now as we catch us up to where this course actually begins. So you can see that we begin actually here, Minoan and Mycenaean. And I'll get back to that in just a moment. We'll go through the early Greek civilization, what is called the Archaic period, that will then move into the classical Greek period that most of us probably are familiar with. Time of Pericles, the time of Plato, Aristotle, those guys. As we move through the Greek period, we're going to be looking at all of the arts, the sculpture, the frescoes, the paintings that have remained, the architecture, the poetry, the epics. So some of these names may be familiar to you. Homer. Believe me, you're not going to read the entire Iliad and Odyssey, everybody. This is a humanities class. But we'll be discussing aspects of it. We'll be talking about Sappho's poetry. We'll move into the philosophy of the Greek period, Socrates, and the pre-Socratic, before Socrates, those philosophers. Plato and Aristotle. We'll be talking about how philosophy links into theater and into play. You'll have your midterm. There are two parts. One is an essay and one is a multiple choice. Make sure that you read the overviews. These overviews have a lot of the embedded material and the links to those materials, and they kind of set everything up. So make sure that you are reading the overviews as you move forward. We move away from the classical Greek period here to the Hellenistic period. This is after the death of Alexander the Great, seeing the shifts in the arts, seeing how the art is doing what we mentioned earlier, reflecting the feelings, the emotions you said, the thoughts, the zeitgeist or the spirit of the times, and how those still affect us today. From that, we move into Rome, the early Roman Republic, and then into the Roman Empire. After the fall of Rome, we move into what is termed the early Christian and the Byzantine period, a major shift in the arts, a major shift in the focus of the arts, and we end. Not all done today. We've got plenty of time. Everybody take a deep cleansing breath. If you pace yourself, you're going to be great. You're going to be fine. I don't want any anxiety. We got enough out there in the world. All right. We're just going to find our own humanity and hopefully have a very good time. So I'm going to now stop the share for a second. And are there any questions whatsoever? Please turn on your videos. Any questions? And unmute.
No.
No question.
No.
I've
No
done a
question.
good job. Yes. No questions. Okay, so how many of you are feeling like really nervous? How many of you let me see, I've seen some hands here. Don't feel nervous. You're going to do fine. I'm on your side. Remember, I'm the professor. So we're going to be okay. If we're really having some problems, if you're struggling in any way, just contact me. All right? I want you to get through this. More importantly, I want you to learn and start to enjoy and appreciate art. Remember, appreciation isn't I like it or I don't like it. Appreciation is I understand. I understand what the artist is doing. That's basically it. Okay? No questions, no anxiety, no fear. Have fun, express yourself, communicate your emotions, communicate your feelings, and you know, let's all be artists. I'm going to switch and I'm going to start. I'm going to actually start. I know, it's 40 minutes, but I'm going to start. So where I want to start is this, at the dawn of time. our course really begins about 2,500. That's about 4,500 and some 20 years ago. That's where our course starts. 2,500 BCE, before the Christian era. And, but history doesn't begin there. History begins much earlier. So I first think that in order to understand how arts reflect who we are as human beings, we should go back to the earliest art. Some might even term primitive art, to understand that first impetus, that first impulse, that human impulse to create. By the way, the impulse to create, I also believe, and this is just one person, I also believe is the same impulse to destroy. It's a strange thing. Mm-hmm. But in order to get to that, to blow away the cobwebs of thousands of years of history and narrative, what did the earliest peoples, what was their impulse? Why did they create art? So I want to start there and briefly, quickly bring you up to where we are going to start our course with Crete, King Minos, and the Cycladic civilization. So let's screen share. Hopefully it'll work correctly this time. Here we go. What you should be seeing right now is a PowerPoint that says cave paintings.
Yeah.
Yes.
Excellent, excellent. So I'm gonna do it as a slideshow for just a moment. Okay. What you're looking at right now, and the Sister Wendy video that's in there will show you the cavings. She's one of the few individuals who gets to go down in there. I keep calling her Sister Wendy because she's a Catholic nun. It's not like, she's my sister. Okay. But anyway, these cave paintings, we can't go back into these caves anymore. And at Lascaux, which is in France, these are deep in the bowels of the earth. They were discovered, I want to say, in about the 30s. Two boys playing found this cave. When they went into the cave, they found these incredible paintings. Now, one should have to understand, why are these early peoples, Cro-Magnon, why are they going into caves, dark, deep recesses, to paint these images? We know one thing. There was no light, so there were two individuals at least. One who held the fat that they would use as a light, and the other one who would paint. And they would use, chalk and coal and different kinds of pigments on these walls. Certainly it wasn't public art. Certainly it wasn't because, oh, hey, I want to show off my paintings to people deep in the bowels of the earth where there is no light. So the mystery of this continues. And many people have come up with various reasons. Why would they paint in these deep caves? Now, Cro-Magnon did not live inside the caves. They lived on the ledges or outside, and they would migrate. So there's a sense that there's a seasonal quality to their movements. And perhaps they would return to the caves, or others would come and paint over them. What we also discover in these caves, which is kind of interesting, especially the cave at Lascaux, because there are others, we rarely find human figures. There are no human figures. In Argentina, which is my homeland, by the way, I'm an immigrant from Buenos Aires. But anyway, in those cave paintings, there are some stick figures. And certainly, as you can see down here, hopefully you can see my cursor, hands. It would depict human hands, either in this relief, in this negative form where they just use a little reed pigment and blow it, or actually paint on the hand and pop it on there. But in Lascaux, there are no human figures, there are animals, all kinds of animals. We're looking at those caves right now. And you're going to find something else out here, that the contour of the cave is incorporated into the depictions of the animals. Now, my question is, no humans, these animals, why did they paint these animals? I open it up.
I would say because that was predominantly all that they knew of at the time. Besides your person. Maybe if they weren't solitary, right? If they were in groups, your group probably was what, consisting of 4 to 5, maybe 6 people at max, if that. So if that's all you kind of had, all you had was to maybe kind of draw your surrounding areas to pay homage to what is really around. So if there is another group and they've rotated, like you said, maybe it was a way of categorizing what that area was about.
So
So
it's like a map that showed I'm sorry.
like a catalog.
Yeah, like a Disneyland map. Hey, here's
Right.
here's how. Now the troops could be maybe larger than 6, maybe 20, let's just say. But yes, now they still could be paying each other. But you said something interesting, an homage, kind of an honoring of the animals. The other interesting thing is that the Cro-Magnon subsisted on caribou. That was the main staple, like a reindeer. And they used every aspect of this thing. The hide, the hoof, the horns, the meat, everything. Sister Wendy, I think, calls it like a walking supermarket. They don't paint caribou. They paint the bulls. They paint the Mongolian horse. They paint bison. And notice that as we look at these works, they don't look necessarily exactly the way this bull would look with these thin legs here, pointy hooves. It gives you a suggestion of the bull. It gives you a suggestion of its majesty, of its power. It's an impression. It's
Also,
impressionistic.
I mean, I feel like at that time, animals were definitely a source of spiritual meaning, you know?
Yes, Elizabeth, and explain a little bit more on that.
Just like, well, now we have many interpretations of religions and, you know, God and all of these things. But back then, you know, a different animal meant a different thing, a different God, a different source of, we needed to rain, well, we're going to praise X, Y animal. If we need food, let's, you know, go towards X animal. So it had, you know, also here we can go down the street to McDonald's or a restaurant and eat. Animals were their source of life, were their source of eating, of spirituality. Like it centered a lot of their core meaning.
Absolutely. And you know, the first forms of religion and spirituality, as you're suggesting, were animism, the worship of the animals. And we can see as we study the narratives and the mythologies, where you have these chimerical figures where half man, half goat, half man, half horse, half man, half bull. This emerging from the worship of the animals, you're suggesting, perhaps more towards the human form. And I think you're right. But there's something else that is captured in these paintings, I feel, is this. And perhaps why they don't paint human beings and why they don't paint the caribou, which they subsisted on, which they hunted. And that's this. Can you imagine what it would be like to live at that time as a human being? Are you strong as these animals? Can you exist? A human child left out into the open is the least adaptable of most species. We don't even have any instincts left. We have, as an infant or as brand new, a moral instinct, a kind of protective instinct. You ever seen little babies, if you touch them, they're really strong?
Yeah.
Away. But imagine what these human beings looked at. They saw that the gazelle was faster and more graceful. They saw that the ox was more powerful. They saw that the lion had greater stealth. They saw in these animals perhaps qualities they wished they had.
Life was more primal.
It was indeed more primal. But for the animals, it seemed to the human being, perhaps it was more free.
Right.
Not so restricted. Imagine what it was like, cold, dark, hungry. You spent the majority of your day trying to feed your basic needs. And yet the animals could fly, could run. No wonder we worship. And we continue to look at it this way. When we speak of people today, sometimes we use animal imagery, sometimes in really nasty and derogatory ways. But other times we might say something cunning as a fox, strong as an ox, courageous as a lion. Because what art does is it reflects perhaps what we wish we could be, what we wish the society could be like, what we wish existence could be like. Indeed, art is a dream factory and a nightmare factory as well. And I think to try and, whether you're trying to worship them, honor them, pay homage, as you suggested, to them, or it's a dream wish that you wish to fulfill, art still does that. I know that in our times, art has become more political rather than mimetic, meant to imitate. But before we get to that kind of theory, there's also a kind of magic that goes and is the beginning of all arts. And that magic is pageant and ceremony, and also the depiction of figures. There, as we move forward, the notion of capturing the God in a totem, in a fetish, in a sculpture, in a painting, that if you could imitate the God, you could control it. That later on evolved into, if you knew the name of the God, you could control it. This kind of black magic, necromancy is what it was called. But this is why in certain religions, you may not pronounce the name of the God. To do so would cause death, a stoning. And I don't mean marijuana stoning, I mean actual stones. Blast at you. Because this idea of knowing the name, of creating the likeness in such a way that you capture the God in it, is to control it. And I suggested the word magic. We should understand one other thing, that all arts, and especially drama, movies, begins in magic. Often people felt that these individuals felt disempowered, that they were in a sense at the whim and the will of the elements. The opposite is true. They believed they could control the elements. And they could control the elements through sympathetic magic. That if they imitated the elements, imitated the desired result, that they could force it to happen. And so rain is needed. And so a ceremony begins. And people dance. And they mimic the rain. And in mimicking that rain, they can command the elements to rain, or the hunt. And so the ceremony begins. And individuals are hunters. And an individual is dressed up as the bison. And the bison does the dance with the hunters. And the bison gives himself over to the hunt, sacrificing himself in a kind of a symbiotic moment to ensure a good hunt. And certain individuals in the tribe, when they danced, they got lucky, it rained consistently. Not when this individual danced, but when this individual danced. And that individual became the magi, the magician, the shaman. Because when that individual danced, he commanded, and so it is. As it is in heaven, so is it on earth. If you think of the Jewish star with the interlocked triangles, one pointing to the heavens, one pointing to the earth. If you think of a lot of religious iconography, and including fortune-telling cards of the magician, like the tarot cards, the first card. As it is in heaven, as it is, so too on earth. This is the command. And when that individual danced, it happened. And when that individual danced, the bison was hunted and caught. But of course, they're going to run out of luck. And at some point when that individual dances, it doesn't rain. And the hunt isn't insured. And so a new thought comes in. Well, if we don't command the elements, then who does? And since I can't make it rain, I better ask the person who can make it rain to make it rain. And so command became request, became prayer. But it starts in magic. And those ceremonies are performed in public. And it has all the requisite aspects of a drama. It has a script. It has action and conflict. It has costume and actors, participants, and audience. Another form is homeopathic, which is the beginning of medicine, poultices and potions and concoctions and all these kinds of things. We'll leave that for another time. Just some more of these, the reverence for the animal. In our time, do we revere the way they may have? Do we revere the animal the way they may have? Honor the animal, respect the animal.
I don't think so.
Relationships.
I don't think so anymore.
I don't think so.
I think so between certain cultures. I mean, within the Jewish community, they hold certain things very strong, and they have to have prayer over their meat, over their animals, in order to be able to consume that meat. So I would think that that would still be in some form still back to this basic time, where you have to value the life of an animal in order to consume said meat. You know, because to not value their life is to not, I guess in basic form, not value your own life and the circle of life itself.
All right, we're starting to sound like the Lion King, and that's fine. It is the circle.
Yeah, I mean, it's true.
And, you know, I think that, yeah, let's just say in today's society, we talk about ethical treatment of animals. We have these subdivisions of groups. We have vegetarians and pescatarians and all these kinds of vegans and whatnot. I like to say that a vegetarian is someone who's never heard a vegetable stream. I don't like to politicize everything necessarily, but I'd like to think that in our day and age, in what they call woke society to some degree, there is now a move towards more ethical treatment of animals. I don't know if there's enough. You know, I can't stand zoos. I can't stand rodeos. I can't stand a circus. I have 2 bloodhounds, a cat, and probably other things living amongst us. But I hope that we're getting back to the kind of reverence, not just for the animals, but for all of nature, that will allow us to kind of interact on a symbiotic rather than unsustainable level.
I definitely was going to think that now we cage animals for our amusement instead of appreciating their beauty and leaving them in their own elements.
Yep. They're putting kids in cages too.
Yes.
Sorry about that one.
Well, this is humanities, right? And we're talking about
Right. There's no censorship when it comes to this kind of stuff. It's not a matter of accepting one view over another. It's just looking at facts. What we're looking at right now is the Woman of Willendorf, one of the earliest sculptures. Remember, these are all prior to the period we're about to study. I just don't want to just jump abruptly into it. And what we see here is a little sculpture. And what is most noticeable to you? What do you see that stands out?
Her body, her disturbed body,
Her body.
And
Body.
her
it's
breast.
like her shape, the body of her shape.
Right. What a wonderful, great little hairdo. Very elaborate little hairdo she's got. And just like a mouth, a little hole for a mouth. No other features are shown here. You see her arms here, arms going over, holding her breast down. The breast, I've asked the question before, this doesn't look like an actual woman. Everybody said, oh, yes, it does. And I have to agree, it does. But certain things are accentuated is the main point. And certainly the breasts are accentuated, the hips are accentuated, and the yoni, the pubis area here, is also accentuated, as is the source of all life, the navel. It's interesting when you think back that our umbilical cord ties us all the way back to the first peoples. In biblical Judeo-Christian mythology, Adam had no navel. But this is the thing that connects us to all people. Now the question arises, well, what is this thing? Why so much accentuating of the breasts, the yoni, the pubis area, the hips?
It's all what gives life. The breast you feed the children, the umbilical cord is what's the source between the moment they're birthing and you come out through the birth canal.
Absolutely. So this really is emphasizing this notion of fertility, of birth, of nurturing. You know, the earliest gods were not male gods. They were female gods, like Lilith and others. And the reason for that makes sense. We witness in our environment that life issues from the woman. That's the original creator. When men came in and kind of demonized the woman and turned the woman, the Hagia Sophia, the woman of holy knowledge, into just the hag, the crone, the witch, the she-devil, we're going to start to see that actually occurring. It changed. And all of a sudden, male gods, whatever gods you may know, took over. But here is certainly something that was probably meant to be a fertility totem, something that might be placed, by today's standards, in a bedroom if you believed in something like that. And we still have our little fetishes and totem. And when I say fetish, I don't mean sexual stuff. I mean the idea of fertility. So let's just be clear on that one. But, or they may even be placed in graves, buried with someone. Now, the notion of an afterlife will really change and depend on the natural environment in which people are living. When your environment is precarious and dangerous, then your notion, your concept of the afterlife is going to resume that. When your environment is stable and calm, your notion of the afterlife is going to reflect that. The Nile River in ancient Egypt is a very predictable river. You know when it's going to overflow, so you can use that for fertilizing crops and soil and all that. You know when it won't, and so you can utilize that. Very predictable. And the Egyptian view of the afterlife is indeed quite predictable. In fact, you take everything, all the notoriety, all your achievements into the tomb with you, slaves included, into the afterlife, so that you don't come into the afterlife like with some kind of miserable anonymity. In Mesopotamia, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, these were very unpredictable rivers. Your entire crop could be destroyed in one rainfall. And therefore, their view of the afterlife took that on, this unpredictability. When you consider your own views, regardless of your religions, and some of them don't include the notion of an afterlife, but in the Christian religion, this notion of a heaven and of a hell is often really focused on reflecting our own precarious environment and what we're noticing. So here is the totem, a fetish, if you will, that is life-affirming, one that's meant to be a symbol, if you will, of fertility. I was just talking a little bit about these two rivers, Euphrates and the Tigris. Earliest real civilization started here. We're starting well after. There was the Sumerian, the Assyrian, the Babylonian, the Egyptian, and others. And they started in this fertile crescent here. And we're going to move forward. Some of their artwork here, and some of the earliest narratives ever. Here, and also the earliest laws. You may have heard of the Code of Hammurabi. Here is a stele. This is just a tablet incised in cuneiform with the laws. Now, Hammurabi is one of the first to write down the laws and put them in public places. Therefore, you just couldn't have some arbitrary king making a decision. We knew what the laws were, the public knew what the laws were, and what the penalties were. Often in totalitarian states, the opposite is done. Things are done behind closed doors, and they are indeed arbitrary. The earliest existing narrative story is the Epic of Gilgamesh. And in this epic, we get the roots of so many of our common narratives. A movement into the underworld and a return, the resurrection theme. The conflict between brothers or best of friends. The symbology often of destruction that becomes purification. And at the time, this flood of Noahs that you may be aware of in Christian texts was also a flood that was well written about in other texts as well. So we know that the flood actually existed. How individuals interpreted that and handed that event down depends on their belief systems. But in the Epic of Gilgamesh, a flood occurs, and it is a cleansing. In the Epic of Noah, a flood occurs. It is a punishment for sin, for evil, and therefore a cleansing and a restarting. Here I am showing a Babylonian god, Lamazoo. In the Mesopotamian cultures, these were little, this is Hammurabi in the code again, one of the early kings. But this is a votive figure, and these figures were placed inside the tombs of dead people. we're still trying to figure out, what is that expression? What do they see? Is that fear? Is that wonder? Remember, I suggested that these individuals felt that the afterworld was a precarious and dangerous place, just as the real world was. But these individuals with the wide eyes and the lapis lazuli, what are they seeing on the other side? Is it horror? Is it awful, meaning full of awe? What is it?
Get out of here.
It's a dog, I see it.
Sorry.
That's all right. So again, I'm showing you some of the earlier artwork before the time in which we begin. In Babylon, ancient Babylon, there was the Tower of Babel that became something important in the Judeo-Christian texts. This notion of creating a tower that could reach up to the gods. And the notion of this idea of becoming like the god, rising to that level, is often what the artist aspires to. So I'm going to tell you a myth, a Greek myth. It's the myth of Apollo and of Marsyas. Marsyas is what we call a satyr. His bottom half is that of a goat. His top half is that of a man. And he was an incredible Marsyas, this satyr, musician, the most amazing musician on earth. Now, the god of music, which forms words like the Muses, was Apollo. And Marsyas said, I challenge the god Apollo to a contest, a music contest. And Apollo accepts. He says, but here's the wager. Whoever wins gets to flay the loser alive. Flaying means to skin someone alive. Whoever loses will be flayed, skinned alive. And he accepts. And they have the contest. And of course, the god wins. Of course, Apollo wins. And Marsyas loses. But Marsyas knew that this was going to be the outcome. That you will always lose to the god. And he challenges him knowing that. Knowing that he will be hung upside down by his hooves and gently, tenderly flayed, skinned alive. Why does he do it? Because that's what the artist does. He challenges the god. He aspires to create from artifice the natural, to create as well as a god can, knowing you will always lose, knowing that in putting yourself out there, the public, the critics, your friends will just start to poke at all your nerve endings which have been exposed because you want to show who you are, your feelings, your emotions, the things we talked about. That's what the artist does. Challenges the god. Whether you're a dancer, a poet, a singer, a sculptor, a writer, you challenge the god. And you will always lose. And the Tower of Babel in the story, God destroys it, causes them not to be able to speak the same languages, where we get the word babbling. But there was an actual one, and this is it. A ziggurat's like a pyramid, but a step pyramid. And so the ones, not like Egyptian, although they have some of them, are in Mesopotamia. But here we are. Here's where we're coming to. And we only have about 10 minutes. So when we meet on Thursday, we'll be moving further into this. We're going into what's called the Minoan civilization. And I'm gonna switch screens for just a moment, okay? I'm gonna show you something else. Hey everybody, I can see you again. Any questions so far? We all right?
We're good.
Will I see you on Thursday?
Yes.
Yes.
Woohoo! Okay. Has anybody ever heard of King Minos? What do you know? No one? Not to be
Like the Midas touch?
not to be mistaken with Midas.
Got it.
Minos. Midas got the donkey ears and everything touched turned to gold. Yeah. Now this is King Minos, also legendary king of Knossos here, this palace, in the island of Crete. We all say Crete. You know where Crete is in the Mediterranean off the coast of Greece?
Yes.
This was the first, in that area, Cycladic area, major civilization. And when we talk about King Minos, who came in the late Minoan period, we've named the entire civilization after him, after King Minos. And therefore it's called Minoan. And there are many legends and mythologies that surfaced from this period, some of which you may be familiar with already. But before I get into that, why was this such a cultural center? Why was this such a powerful center? Why is this one of the first of these major civilizations in this region? Primarily, it's because of trade. The Minoans didn't really need a huge army. They were kind of isolated as an island, so they could easily protect it. So they didn't develop a big military complex there or mindset. But trade and business, so the cross-fertilization coming from the east into the west, from the west as well, created a kind of very cosmopolitan society there. And this civilization, in a lot of ways, its power will end. And coming from Greece in the Peloponnese area will come the Mycenaeans. And they'll come down and basically eradicate the civilization. But other things besides that had caused this to happen. Off of Crete is another island that you may know, maybe you've even visited there, Santorini. Okay.
Santorini.
Yeah.
I've heard of it, but never been there.
Got a chance to go there, it's great. But part of it has been blown off by a volcano. This volcano just erupted. And so Santorini is kind of half moon shaped. And where the volcano is, they call it the caldera, like a cauldron of bubbling stuff. Amazing place. But when that volcano erupted, sending lava and hot ash everywhere, it really led to the decline, if not the complete defeat, of this civilization. So there were a number of factors, but the eruption of the volcano is probably the most significant. And this also led to this notion of a lost civilization, of a lost culture, like the myth of Atlantis.
Right.
Many people feel that Atlantis was either in Santorini or potentially here in Crete. We'll talk about that. But there are many legends that have surfaced surrounding this idea of this civilization. Have you heard of the story of Daedalus and Icarus?
No.
Sounds familiar.
Okay. Daedalus was one of the greatest Greek craftsmen, engineers, architects. King Minos wanted him, and he brought him over to Crete, and he brought with him Daedalus' son Icarus. And he wanted Daedalus to create this incredible maze called, this is the legend, called a labyrinth. Now inside this labyrinth is going to be this half man, half bull, named after King Minos, Minotaur. Tar meaning bull, Taurus, right? Minotaur. And inside of this labyrinth would be the Minotaur, and they'd be kind of putting in these, I'll tell you that story a little later, next time we meet, these Athenians. But this monster would kill them. Now, once Daedalus and his son Icarus had created this labyrinth, they wanted to get off the island. But King Minos didn't want him to go. He was too valuable to him. So being a great craftsman, being a great engineer, being a great architect, he devised a set of wings for himself and for his son, Daedalus did. And he took a bunch of sticks, put them together, got a bunch of wax and some feathers, stuck the feathers in with the wax. And he gave his son some advice. We're going to fly over the Aegean, but you have to be really careful where you fly. Tell me, anybody remember this one?
Not too close to the sun and not too close to the ocean.
Lizette, fantastic that you mentioned the ocean part, because most people forget that part. They say, Daedalus said to Icarus, don't fly too close to the sun. To fly too close to the sun, it will heat up the wax, the feathers will fall off, and you'll go plunging to your death. But he also said, as you mentioned, Lizette, do not fly too close to the water. because as the water evaporates and gets on your wings, they're going to become, and condenses on your wings, too heavy for you to flap, you'll plunge to your death. So you need to fly right in the middle. All things in moderation. The golden rule, fly in the middle. Don't give over to excessive emotion. Don't give over to excessive reason. Fly in the middle. Do all things, but not to excess in anything. So it begins with that mythology. And there's another myth, one that you're going to encounter. But you'll notice what I just said about Minos, Theseus, and the Minotaur. What are your assignments? We'll get to it on Thursday. You'll notice that what I suggested about this myth, it isn't just about a guy and his son and building wings and flying. It has more to do with a kind of a lesson, as I suggested about this golden mean, about this idea of moderation. Too much pride, trying to be like the god, flying to the sun, you'll get burned because you're no god. Too low, you'll get burned. Some of us are manic, some of us are depressed. Some of us are manic depressive. So I am just manic dramatic. That's all I have. Manic dramatic. But you know, some of us get carried away by our appetites. Some of us get carried away by our spirit. Some of us get carried away by with our logic, as if logic solves anything.
Our problems.
We need to fly in the middle. There are many myths that have this kind of underlying meaning and message and what they survive. So I don't want to start to look at it just as, oh, it's a strange story of, completely fiction. So imagine something like this. I'm not sure exactly what your backgrounds are, but I had mentioned the story, if you read it, of Isaac and Abraham. Are you familiar with that one? Abraham, as the Bible says it, is asked by God to sacrifice his son, Isaac. Why? Because Abraham needs to show that his first devotion is to God. And by sacrificing the most precious thing he owns to God, it would show that devotion. So Abraham goes and he takes Isaac, ties him up, about to cut his throat as a sacrifice to the God. Before he does so, an angel comes down, stays the hand of Abraham, and says, do not do this. Instead, sacrifice this ram. And so Isaac is saved. The ram is sacrificed himself. Now, one can read this, and theologians would read it like, okay, it's this idea of devotion to God. But something else is at work here. And I believe it shows a shift in cultural practices, a movement away from human sacrifice to animal sacrifice, which occurred in history. And that movement then will go, as we will see, from animal sacrifice to grain sacrifice, to casting your bread upon the waters, to heaping symbolically on some object the sins of the community, your own sins, and by expelling them, by casting them away, to be born again. In this sense, the last human sacrifice would be Jesus. Sins of mankind sacrificed, if you believe, born again. So these ideas are not new. One of your first assignments is not only going to be why create art. We discussed a little bit about the impetus. Watch the Sister Wendy video. But it's also going to move into this myth of Theseus and the Minotaur. So you're going to read the myth, and it's going to ask you, what might be some of these underlying meanings here, besides a half man, half bull? What is it maybe showing culturally? Is it showing us a power shift? And remember that these myths are written down by the victors, as is history. So the myth of Minos, the myth of the Minotaur and Theseus that you're going to read, was written by those who conquered, by the Athenians, reflecting back on the Minoans. Is there an agenda there? If you have any questions about that, you'll have an opportunity to ask me on Thursday, but I'm always available to you, so you can always email me. I'm going to stop the share for a moment. When we return on Thursday, I will continue with this Minoan thing and look at some of the artwork and what it reflects about that culture, that mindset, their emotions, their feelings. We'll move into the Mycenaean one, and we have time for that. Please take a deep breath. Don't be overwhelmed. Pace yourselves. Any questions?
You.
Can't wait to, okay. I hope I get to see you Thursday.
Thursday.
Okay, I got a lot more to tell you about human sacrifice. Okay.
Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take
Have a
care.
good day.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.